President Muhammadu Buhari today condemned the abuse meted out to about 400 men and boys who were rescued from an illegal Islamic reform school building in Kaduna by the police on Thursday. President Muhammadu Buhari's reaction to the alleged abuse and torture is contained in a statement issued by his senior special assistant on media and publicity, Mr. Garba Shehu. While commending the police for the uncovering of and arrest of suspected operators of what he describes as an unedifying so-called reform institution, the president also condemned right abuses of both adults and children. And to curb the prevalence of such institutions, President Buhari also stressed the need to enforce the statutory provisions on free and compulsory basic education. According to the President, Section 2 of the Compulsory Free Universal Basic Education Act provides that every government in Nigeria shall provide free, compulsory and universal basic education for every child of primary and junior secondary school age. It is indeed a crime for any parent to keep his child out of school for this period. He also calls on religious and traditional authorities to work with the government at all levels to stop unwanted cultural practices that amount to the abuse of children, as well as expose those abuses that may have been ignored for many years in the communities. Meanwhile, former President Olusegun Obasanjo says that he's optimistic that the proposed meeting between President Muhammadu Buhari and his South African counterpart, Cyril Ramaphosa, next month will provide a much-needed venue for smothering of the near-strained relationship between the two countries over the recent xenophobic attacks on Nigerians. He made the comments in Abeokuta, the Ogun State capital, while answering questions from journalists on the issue. The former president, who commended the steps taken so far by the two leaders, called for the reactivation of the bilateral commission between the two countries and also asked Nigerians to be law-abiding and good ambassadors of the country wherever they find themselves.
My joy is that President Ramaphosa is ready to do what needs to be done to stop these ugly incidents and to put the relationship between Nigeria and South Africa on the right track. The meeting that President Buhari and President Ramaphosa will have during the first week of October should smoothen the ground, and the right statement and the right action coming from both sides should encourage our people to go back. But as I've always said, Nigerians living outside Nigeria must try to be good citizens of wherever they live. When I was president, when I met Nigerians abroad, I said, look, be good citizens of the country in which you live, and then that way you will be good citizens of the world. And when you come back home, you will be good citizens of Nigeria. I met a Nigerian who, and there are many like that, in fact, two, who are doing very good business, legitimate business. The turnover run into millions and millions of dollars, and they employ 50, 60 South Africans. All these must be expressed and must be shown that Nigerians in South Africa are not drug peddlers, they are not criminals.
The death toll from the recent outbreak of yellow fever in Bauchi State has risen to 16 out of the 20 confirmed cases. Executive Chairman of the Bauchi State Primary Healthcare Development Agency, Dr. Rilwanu Muhammad, says that the increase in the death toll followed the rejection of vaccination by some citizens during the statewide vaccination. According to him, no fewer than 119 suspected cases of yellow fever were recorded in the state, out of which 20 positive and 16 already dead. He explains that the state is planning to go into all the areas where the outbreak has been confirmed to carry out the door-to-door spraying and fumigation exercise. Nigeria's judiciary is one of the arms of government which has continued to be under the spotlight, especially as it's believed to be the hope of the common man. Just like the other arms of government, the judiciary has its myriad of challenges, which includes its true independence, speedy dispensation of justice, and the need for reforms. As we continue our special focus on Nigeria's independence anniversary, our next report examines the key challenges in the judiciary and the efforts to address them.
Just like the other arms of government, the Nigerian judiciary came into existence before the country attained self-rule, and by independence in 1960, it attained the status of an independent arm of government. This led to the establishment of the Supreme Court as the apex court, with Sir Adetokunbo Ademola becoming the first indigenous Chief Justice of Nigeria in 1958. The military era, however, witnessed wanton disregard for the rule of law and democratic principles, as the military government treated the judiciary as if it were an integral part of the civil service. The period also witnessed indiscriminate dismissal of judicial officers and open disobedience of judicial pronouncements. The return of democratic rule in 1999, however, brought to the fore the vibrancy and courage of the judiciary, as several landmark decisions were made by the court. This new vigor was attributed to some unique provisions introduced by the 1999 Constitution, including those providing for the establishment of two independent regulatory institutions: the National Judicial Council, NJC, and the Federal Judicial Service Commission. In spite of these positives, however, some major challenges persist. One of such is the lack of independence arising from the judiciary being tied to the apron strings of the executive arm of government, as recently alluded to by the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Tanko Muhammad.
The annual budget of the judiciary is still a far cry from what it ought to be. The figure is either stagnated for a longer period, or it goes on a progressive decline. The only thing I can do at this juncture is to plead with all concerned to let us enjoy our independence holistically. If you say that I am independent, but in a way, whether I like it or not, I have to go cap in hand asking funds to run my office, then I have completely lost my independence.
The judiciary has also had to grapple with accusations and counter-accusations of bribery and corruption against judicial officers.
Our focus has been on reinventing our processes, providing speedy and quality administration of justice, strengthening our structures from the Supreme Court to other courts of records, and stamping out corruption from the system. If any judge is found wanting and there is evidence, please write your petition to the National Judicial Council immediately for prompt action.
Attempts by the federal government in recent past to tackle issues of graft through the arrest and trial of some judges have failed to yield any satisfactory result, as some of the judicial officers whose homes were raided in October 2017 by operatives of the Department of State Services have been absolved of the allegations. For those still in court, the cases are moving at a very slow pace. Apart from corruption, delay in court proceedings, other problems plaguing the third arm of government includes failure of other arms of government to obey judgments of courts, high cost of litigation, over-reliance on legal technicalities, prison congestion, and poor funding.
For more on the judiciary sector, we are now being joined on the News at 10 by Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Jibrin Okutekpa, who is in our Abuja studios. I want to thank you so much indeed for joining us on the News at 10. How would you assess the judiciary 59 years after independence?
Well, good evening, Gimba. Good evening, Nigeria. I think Nigerian judiciary, within the last 59 years, have done the best they could, given the circumstances they found themselves. As you may have seen in your preview, the judiciary is battling to gain independence. You know that Nigerian judiciary has been doing the best they can under the very difficult and excruciating circumstances, either foisted on them by the other arms of government or by the circumstances they find themselves, or some who, very few amongst them, who may not want independence. But by and large, I think Nigerian judiciary has been able to sustain the democracy that we have, given the landmark decisions they have given, particularly during the period that impeachment proceedings in this country became something like you can be done from a brothel. So it was the Nigerian judiciary that, given a stamp of authority, that impeachment proceeding is a serious matter and that it needs to be done in a manner as prescribed by the Constitution. And so for me, the Nigerian judiciary, given the circumstances under which they find themselves, have done creditably well, although there is room for improvement. You mentioned, for instance, the question of delay in administration of justice. Right now, what the Nigerian judiciaries are engaging themselves in mostly is political matters, as if politics is the only business in Nigeria. Other areas of concern are left untouched, not because the judiciary didn't want to do it, but because they are overburdened with work. Nigerian judiciary is about the only judiciary I know in the world that we still engage ourselves in manual handwriting. Judges, the courts are not automated. The courtrooms are nothing but in shambles. So the circumstances call for urgent state of emergency to be declared in the judiciary for the effective and efficient administration of justice in Nigeria.
You want a state of emergency to be pronounced on the judicial system, and you've made a lot of notifications here concerning the challenges that we face. But are there any quick fixes to it, talking about solutions now? What solutions would you prefer to try to ensure that this kind of challenges, we overcome them once and for all?
First, I think there should be an improvement in the condition of judicial officers. The courtrooms should be improved. Now, we also need more judges. If you recall, in the Supreme Court of Nigeria, for instance, have not had its full complement of 21 justices as prescribed in the Constitution. I do not know why, for instance, we should not have the equivalent number of Senate as justices of Supreme Court, the equivalent number of members of the House of Representatives as the justices of the Court of Appeal, and in the same way go down the states. We have the equivalent number of members of the House of Assembly as constituting judges of the state high courts, because the volume of litigations, the volume of work on our judges is so much that you don't expect them to work with and come out with effective and efficient justice delivery system, because now the environment is not conducive. Judges are expected to go to read in the night. In most cases, they don't have a conducive accommodation, no social amenity, no light, no nothing. So you don't expect judges to work under that excruciating environment and expect that you are going to have efficient and effective justice delivery system. The second point is the recruitment of our judges must take care of those who have capacity to withstand temptation, those who have capacity to say no to corruption, because Nigerian judges are working in a corrupt environment, and when you are working in a corrupt environment, you are likely to be tempted, because if a judge, for instance, that goes on election petition, the chairman, for instance, as I heard on a good note, is paid 800,000. How do you expect that person to resist temptation of somebody coming with a whopping sum of money of, say, $500,000, how will you resist the temptation? So we need to make the environment conducive for judges so that those who then have propensity for corruption can then be dealt with when the environment is made conducive for them.
That's a good place to let it rest. I most sincerely thank you, Mr. Jibrin Okutekpa, a senior advocate of Nigeria, for enlightening us more on the ways to go in combating the challenges we face in the judicial process in our country. Many thanks indeed for talking to us here on the News at 10.
Thank you.